It's the best off-road modification you can make to your vehicle, and it's absolutely free. We're talking about dropping the air pressure in your tire. Today, I'm going to go into why you want to drop your air pressure off-road, just how low you can safely go, and how big of a performance benefit it makes. Woo! Here comes the rain. It's going to be fun. Now there are two main tools you'll need to air your tires down. The first being a low pressure tire gauge. The whole concept here is you want to be able to read the difference between 7 psi and 12 psi because it makes a major difference on the trail. The number two thing is you need to be able to have something that can effectively and quickly get the air out of the tire. Now you're going to be accessing that by the actual valve stem. Now I like to use a valve core remover. These little tools are very inexpensive, but they work great. I can remove this core and take this tire from about 30 psi to around 7 psi in about a minute and a half. And that really cuts down time on airing down so you can hurry up and get on the trail. Okay, so let's start out with some quick basics. Now, I am running a 37 by 1250 Nitto Trail Grappler. It's mounted on a 17-inch beadlock wheel from KMC. I'll talk to you more about that in a second. But what I want to show you is this. So we came out on, this is always like my fun warm-up trail out here on Falls Dam. This is one of the first obstacles you get to. And I haven't aired down yet. Now, there's a reason. I just kind of want to, show you. So climbing up on a rock like this, definitely easier aired down than it is aired up. So I'm still running street pressure, which is about 30 psi. And what you can see is you get a little bit of bulge from the tire, but it's not a lot. Now, the key here is to try to get the tire to conform to the obstacle as much as possible. So what we're going to do is go ahead and break down, or air down I should say, hopefully not break down, the tires to get a little bit more traction. And what I want to show you is how much more of a bulge that you're going to get out of this tire by dropping it down. So now we are at 15 psi. Now you can see we clearly have more of a bulge coming from the sidewall, which is fantastic. That equates to more traction and ultimately equates to a better ride inside. Now 15 psi is pretty good. You're going to get a definite performance advantage out of it. You're not putting as much stress on the tire carcass overall, and this will help definitely when it's as muddy and wet in conditions like this. However, more typically for a Wrangler maybe specifically, I usually recommend going down to between 10 and 12. Now, that range right there is safe if you have a non-beadlock wheel. Once you get below 10 psi, you run the risk of de-beading the tire. Now, that's why I have a beadlock, because it actually, this external ring here is bolting it's bolted to the main portion of the wheel, and it sandwiches this outside bead. So if I go super low air pressure, I've got something to make sure the tire stays in place. Now these are single bead locks, and what that basically means is it doesn't have a bead lock on the inside here. Typically, if you're going to lose a bead, a lot of times you will see that it comes off from the outside. I don't know why that is, but it is. So this is not a double bead lock, so it's not 100% foolproof that I won't lose it. But as you can see, that's better, a little bit more ride comfort. Sometimes if you're balancing out with getting, I guess, ground clearance and you don't want to sacrifice too much because you don't have so much sidewall, 15 psi is pretty good. All right, now let's check out 10 psi. We are now looking at 10 psi, and as you can see, we have a substantial tire bulge. Now 10 psi has traditionally been my go-to if it is a non-beadlock wheel. One of the things I mentioned about is the steering, and the reason is the greater footprint you have, the heavier the steering can be, and it can be definitely challenging to drive off-road. You know, this is a Rubicon. Doing this obstacle, I have the front locker definitely engaged. but you have to balance it out. If you're on terrain that's slick like this, it might not be so bad. But you can see you've got a lot more tire bulge, which is good. Again, I've got the sidewall to do it. These Nittos can handle it. It is a load range D tire, so it's not going to hurt this thing to get it down very low. Now 10 PSI is good. As you can tell, we've got more sidewall bulge. It's going to ride better at this PSI. It's going to perform better. However, this is where the beadlock comes into play, because even at 10 PSI, that's good, but it can be better, and you can get more of this tire tread onto the rock. As you can see, you've got a longer track patch that's on the rock now, and as we continue to air down, you will see more of that track patch sort of get across, so you're gonna have a better job, or a little bit easier job of moving forward. You see right here, we're sort of settled in there real nicely, but let's go ahead and check out what I'm ultimately going to run today, which is 7 PSI. We are at 7 PSI, and as you can see, the tire has definitely conformed way more to the rock. In fact, look how much actual contact pattern we now have as opposed to where we started out at about 30 PSI. So, you know, again, not worried about this sidewall. These tires are meant to do this. Now, this is my favorite sort of pressure for this type of wheeling, mostly because, especially in this Jeep, I don't have hydraulic assist steering. So when you're wheeling in this type of terrain and you've got the front end locked, having the tires down in single digit range can be really hard on the steering overall. This kind of gives me a nice balance where I can still steer fairly easily, and it's not that big of a deal. So now, this is what I like. This is kind of what you're looking for, especially at this low PSI, to have that much of a bulge from the tire. Again, this is a load range D tire, so it really needs to be down fairly low to get that type of footprint. So let's go do a little bit of wheeling, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about really why this is such a benefit. Now, the two main reasons you want to air your tires down off-road. Number one is it's going to allow it to conform to the terrain around you. Now, this is especially important in areas where you're rock crawling, where you really need that tire to just sort of conform around the rock and really bite and grip. You know, if you're going to wheel in sand, even in mud, it all helps to have that larger footprint. It's going to equate to essentially better traction, and it's going to also allow you to get into our number two reason, which is better ride quality. Now, depending on how large your tire is how much sidewall give you'll have, and that sidewall give is that secondary suspension. Now, on something like this 37 with a 17-inch wheel, I have a fair amount of sidewall that allows me at 7 PSI to have that tire sort of cycle and soak up a lot of the terrain, so you're not feeling all those little chatter bumps and irregularities on the trail that are just really annoying. Now, if you have a smaller wheel, let's say a 32-inch tall tire with a 17, you're still going to get that benefit of ride quality, but it's not going to be as much. And you definitely have to be more cautious about, as you air down your tire, you are losing ground clearance, very much so at the axle. So you don't want to get so low that, number one, you risk either de-beating the tire or having an issue where you're messing it up, but you also have to be cautious about how much ground clearance you're willing to sacrifice for that footprint. At 7 PSI with a 37, I'm definitely losing some inches in terms of overall clearance, but it's well worth it for the traction benefits. It's a very wet day up here in Uwharrie National Forest. I've got my buddy Kelly behind me. He's got his JK on a 40-inch Trail Grappler, and we're both down in single digits, but it's so wet in this clay that you really need as much, bite and sort of traction you can get, and a lot of it you have to get some momentum because you just can't crawl over this stuff when it's that wet. you know, having that sort of secondary suspension and that tire down at a low pressure makes it where when you are powering into these obstacles, it's not as rough, and you know, it's easier on the vehicle. You know, you're not getting all that shock load, so it's absolutely worth it in terms of just overall driver sort of feedback on how the vehicle feels and what you're doing to the vehicle. Now, one of the disadvantages of airing down is, number one, it puts a lot of stress on your tire. So you really want to make sure that you have a tire that's sort of up for the task. It's one of the reasons that I really like the Nitto, the Trail Grappler specifically. It's just designed to be able to take this kind of punishment, and I'm not worried about having a flat or sidewall failure or anything like that. So you got to make sure you're getting a tire that's really intended for this. Some of the ways you can look for that, not only is, you know, sidewall construction, how many plies, is it really marketed towards that, do you see people using that tire? I mean, real world you know, reviews and experiences. If you're out on the trail a lot, you know, a lot of clubs will tell you, hey, we all run this tire because it works great in this terrain, or whatever it is. I've been really happy with the Trail Grappler overall. I think it's a very versatile tire, and so I don't mind airing it down this low. It doesn't hurt it. It hasn't, in my experience, been a big deal one way or the other. At the end of the day, there's really no reason not to air your tires down off-road. Even if you're only shaving 15 or 10 PSI out from whatever your street pressure is, it's going to make your vehicle ride better and perform better off-road. Now, obviously you need to be able to put air back in the tire before you get on the highway. I typically will carry a Via Air 100% duty cycle compressor with me. It's not the fastest thing. Typically takes me about 4 minutes per tire to get from 7 to 30 PSI. I'll usually take something to tape the handle shut so I can walk around and do other things while it's airing up, but it's very effective. Now, I've got some cool stuff in store for this JL and some more adventures that's going to be coming up very soon. So please hit like, subscribe, make sure that little bell's ringing when you see this on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on all of our other channels. We've got some really cool Jeep content that is going to be coming out for Jeep guys, and we've got some cool full-size and diesel truck content stuff that's also coming down the pipeline as well. If you have any questions for me, you can find me at Ali Mansour Editor on Instagram, or just hit us up in the comments section below. We appreciate you watching and hope to see you on the trail soon.